Thank you for joining me today. I was asked by my friend the other day if I would make a window seat cushion for him and his family. We discussed how much fabric he needed and he sent away for this gorgeous fabric. You'll see that it's actually got pinch pleats in, so it's a pair of curtains. So this is an upcycle. If you order curtains and they say that each one is 48 inches or 50 inches wide, they're not talking about the fabric, they're talking about the header or the top of the curtains. So in these, that's 100 inches of workable, usable fabric. This one feels like a cotton linen. Let's have a look at the weave. It's a thick, robust fabric, so it's going to be ideal for the bench seat. So let's get on with it. This is the nice thing about using cotton thread. I'm just going to rip all of this out all the way across. It saves so much time. I don't need to keep the top, so I didn't really worry about making holes, and I'm not going to keep this. This needs to go too. No point in really saving this, it just tears where it's been sewn. So having pulled the back off from the front, I'm going to look at this. I know it's not quite wide enough. I need 101 inches and this is 4 inches too short. It won't do it top and bottom because that's too short anyway. There's nothing in the weave that dictates I have to go one way or the other. The only thing is, will I get a pattern match that way? Now my pattern match is too far over, but a pattern match this way is probably a better one to look for. So I will go the way they were made. The other thing that I've noticed is this isn't really a straight line. So I need to straighten that up and then I'll work from there. I'm going to cut a little bit off. If I do a trial about an inch up from the bottom, I'll see where this dissects, and I can use this for piping, so I'm really not wasting anything. I've followed the weaving, but you can see that this is not actually level. So I'm going to take a pen and I'm going to just mark it from pattern to pattern until I do have it level. It's just inconvenient, but the pattern is more important to have straight than the weaving. I'm also going to take this seam out because the seam should be deeper for a pattern match across. It shows here that it's not even. So basically all they did was they used the serger on it to cut the selvage off. But if I have a good seam on one end and a crappy seam on the other, it's going to be really obvious. I'd much rather do it right than to do it wrong. And then I'm going to cut all my pieces to be correct first time. So this is coming out all the way up on both pieces because I want the pattern matches to be as good as possible. This is why remake of something can take a little bit longer. I'll pull that out quite quickly. I drew a line and I cut all the way across. Now I am going to measure. The seat cushion is 20 inches. So the cover needs to be 21 inches. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to run the bottom of my ruler here and cut at the 21 mark. And I'm going to do that all the way across. Once I've got one, I'll cut the other pieces to match. I was going to try to get it to look like the fabric wrapped around, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So I am going to cut 3 pieces for one side so that I can work out the parts that I need and sew it together, and then I will decide how I'm going to do the border and the back of the cushion. I should be able to get everything out in this fabric without any worries, including the zip border and the piping. I should be able to get the second side out of here, which is the top end of the curtains. I'm going to lay the piece that I've just cut out on top and use that as a template for going across here. And I'm going to line up the next pattern like that and cut to the next part. You could iron it, but for the most part this is quite flat, so I'm just going to go straight across. I just got to be careful as I do it. I found that if I pull the fabric out once it's matched up, make it a little bit taut, it holds the shape better and then it's easier to cut. So that's something you can bear in mind too. Now something I've noticed on the top is there's some threads that seem to be pulled here and here. So I'm going to make sure that that is on the outside when I sew it together so that I can cut that off and use it as piping. Now I need to cut my third piece to match this. And I'll use the top as the template just in case I've done something wrong underneath. I don't want to compound anything that I've done wrong, and this I'm going to use for the borders. Okay, so I'm going to cut this 21 inches from the bottom like this, and I'm going to cut along. I could cut along the fold here, and that would seem quite a sensible thing to do, but it's actually not. It might vary along the way, in which case if I cut it all to that fold that went over the top of the header, it might be that it's wrong. You don't want to have to worry about trying to remember where to put the piping. In old English houses, I was taught to measure both ends of the window and the middle. I have had windows in the past that were short one end, and you have to adjust your curtains to fit that degree of change. I'm pleased I didn't cut just along the fold because it's about 1/4 of an inch, and if I didn't remember that, it would be a bit of a problem in the finished item. I folded over about 1/2 an inch to 3/4 of an inch, and if I lay it on top of the piece underneath, you'll see that the colours line up. That is my pattern match. Once I have it where I want it, I'm just going to unfold the crease, pop it underneath here, go forward and back, because I don't want that to slip. Bring this down on top and try to keep it as straight as I can to the pattern underneath. This is really not a very clear pattern to follow. I'm going to have to be a little bit cautious. I'm going to fold that over like that, pinch it in place, and then sew along the crease line, keeping the fabric taut. Then I'll line up the next section, which is here. There's the circle here and there's the circle there. There's a piece of orange here, which if I lay on top here is in a straight line. That's the only thing. When you've got something that really isn't that obvious, you have to maneuver it. Again, pull it tight and sew along my creased line. Kind of work out where everything is. The yellow's there. I think that's in line. It certainly is at the top here, so I'm going to pull that out like that, sew to the top. When I get to the top, I'm going to do forward and back again to secure it. Here's my seam. I think actually that looks pretty straight. I've got another one to put in on the side here, and then I'll have my length to cut short. I've ironed these seams as flat as I can. I did it from the back first and then on the front. I'm going to mark my center, so I'm going to put the two seams together like this and measure out to the center of the 3 pieces. Put a little V, and the same at the other side, and center it, because I want the main piece to be as close to the center as possible. I think the overall length of this thing is 100 inches. So I'm going to measure out from that fold here to 30 inches, keeping both of those raw edges together. I'm not stretching it, I'm just laying it out flat. That's 30. Keeping those two straight, I'm going to pop that there, measure up to here, which is 20. 30 plus 20 is 50, but it's both sides at the same time. I am going to be cautious. I'm going to cut it to 22 inches. I should have extra on both ends. Nick that there. I am just going to cut following the weave. Now I did double check. This should be just about perfect. The seat cushion is actually shaped. I'll tip that over so I can see the weave a little bit better. And again, cut this up. I'm just a little bit cautious because I didn't do the pattern, and I know the gentleman's done it right. This is the template that my friend brought round for me. I am going to cut this in half because I don't really need it this long. I had to stick it together. When you're dealing with somebody else's information, always be very careful about it. I have learnt over the years that one person does it one way and another person does it another. There's my halfway mark. I knew that I needed it a bit longer, so I'm going to cut across here. I'm going to use this because basically in one piece, try to keep this as straight as I possibly can, because I don't want one side to be cut up more than another, because I really need to keep this side as straight as I can. 1/2 inch either side for seam allowance. If this was a paper pattern, I'd be pinning the pattern from the other side, but because it's styrofoam, I'm going to have to do it this way. I'm just going to put pins into the styrofoam to hold it in place. Pin along the fold line because I don't want it moving as I move along. I'm going to hold my seams together there, hold them across so everything's even at the top. Allow my 1/2 inch seam allowance and secure here, and the same on the other side. I don't want it too taut, but I don't want it too loose either. Smoothing it out so that I can get that in line and also pinned into place. Once that's done, mark out 1/2 inch from the pattern because you don't want to make a mistake if you can help. Line up those, draw the line in, pass the end. Around the corners you want to do that as well. This has been cleaned a few times so it is a little bit looser than it should be. And put that sharp corner in if you've got one and cut that back. Now my zip is going to go along the back here. Make sure all of that is evenly pulled out and then cut. I need to cut the base out to match the top, and I also want the seams to all match as I go around, which means I am going to line the seam up like that to here, so the two seams are on top of each other. Pin that into place so it can't move, and I'll put another couple in just to hold absolutely everything straight. I overthink, so overdo things rather than underdo things. Those are all in place. Flatten that out as evenly as you can possibly do it. Move it out slightly, hold it, and then cut it. Now I'm going to cut the bottom off to match the top as closely as I possibly can. And then I'll repeat this on the other side so that the seams match. Make sure any cutouts match because these are the ones that have to be straight up and straight down. As I did before, I've just pinned all of my seam in place. The reason why I do it right sides together or wrong sides together is so that the top and bottom actually match. Now I'll carry on up here. Because this has cutouts, I'm going to make a liner to go over the foam. So I have pinned this in the center like that, like I did with the original template. Smooth it out. Put a few extra pins along the way, top and bottom. Move that section over slightly, pull this one out. I really need to make sure it is as close as possible to the outside cover because I'm going to make the inside cover just a wee bit bigger than the outside, about 1/4 inch, because then it will squash down into the external cover a little bit better. Now these white patches here, there's really nothing I can do about it. It's just where a piece of thread from the weaving was left over, and when they printed it, it just left white patches. There's a few in this, but not too many. It's not enough to be a fault because it's all over, but it is inconvenient. You could always use a colouring pen and colour them in. I've done that on occasion when it's been a little bit too much. Make sure that those are even. I've just cut out this to match the top cover. I'm going to lay this out again and recut the bottom one. I'm doing it separately because this is a cotton sateen. The problem is it's been cleaned a few times, so it's a little bit more pliable than if it was brand new, which is why I'm going to do it as a separate piece. Line up the piping cover, right side up, and then face down. I know it's a little bit crinkled, but once it's sewn onto the piping, it won't show. I'll join as many as I can of these together. I'm going to lay that down in the centre there, wrap it round so the raw edges are together, pop that under here. I've got the stitch on 5 and I am going to just run that on down. When you come to a join, cut the threads and then trim back. You want the seams to be about 1/4 inch or just under, and then carry on sewing. When you get to the seam, make sure it's still open, pull it in tight and sew across and work your way through to the end. I'm lining up the back. I know that because this is where the cutout is. Line this up, raw edges together on the longest stitch, and I am going to sew this into place as I go around. I'm going to make sure my seams are open. Double check. Okay, so I've come around the corner. I've already put my 45 in here. I want the heel of the foot to be almost in line with the raw edge here. Needle down, foot up and twist. Then straighten that out slightly and pop it down. So towards the end here. If you've got something like this, always try to keep any cutouts or cut-ins straight. And I'm going to come here. I want this line here to be about 1/2 inch. So I kind of eyeball that. I'm going to come up this way, round the corner slightly. There. A triangle is a very sharp corner, which is a little bit awkward to put in. Pop that all down so that it follows, and then sew the piping into place. This is on the bias, so I don't want to be pulling it if I can help it. So I'm going to make it as loose as possible. Up to the top corner here. should come in nicely. The easiest way is to lay the piping on and use that for holding everything in place. Needle down, foot up, and swing it into place and carry on going. I've just cut this way. I'm going to fold that one in like that and fold it over. Fold that over the top and allow about 1/2 inch overlap. Now you want them both going the same way, otherwise you'll have a horrible mess. And I'm just going to fold those over by about 1/4 inch and sew them into place. Flatten that. It should fit just about perfectly. I'm going to sew this join in. I always do it this way. I always feel I get a better look. I have more control over what it looks like. Cut that back. Sew that a little bit further in before I match it up. Make sure the join is flat like this. Pop that in behind the original and sew into place. It's a little bit loose, but that is going to go in perfectly. This is the border here that I'm putting in. This is the top with the piping on. I'm going to line up my seams together. I wasn't able to pattern match the front border, otherwise I would do that also. Move the needle over one and just sew that all into place. Now there's 2 seams on this border, so I have to make sure that they're both running nicely together. Make sure that those 2 seams match like that. Pull it out, find the center, and I'm going to just work towards that center. Pinch midway along as well, just to make sure that everything stays where it needs to. You could pin this instead of pinching it, but I'm so used to pinching it and holding it in place that that's what I usually advise. I'm going to just run it to the end here. This is all on the front border because I don't want any faults on there. That's got a little clip there which will go round as I pull the front border into the side. Just a little turn. Although this is on the diagonal, it's held in nicely with the piping. I'll just lay the piping down and let it follow through. I had 3 pieces that matched for the border, they just don't match to the top. I'm going to come into the corner here. I'm actually going to put a few cuts in. That should ease that around a little bit better. So I'm going to come into the corner. I'm going to do a reverse. Back into that corner. Straighten that corner up. The piping is still just over there. I'm going to do forward and back here as well. Needle down. And then rotate it again. These sharp corners are really awkward to do. You have to ease them in a little bit better than you would do normally. I can see I can cut in here a little bit better. That'll give a nicer edge to there. I'm going to do a little reverse there too, just to hold everything in place. As I come into this area, I'm just going to fold the fabric at the back, make little pleats so it doesn't pleat into the front. And then down to the corner. Come into the corner and go around as usual. I did a little bit of a reverse there because sometimes those corners, especially with a cotton mix, don't go in tight enough. I'm only going to go, I think, 2 inches forward and then reverse. Yeah, that went in tight enough. This one didn't go in tight enough. You see there's a gap here, so I'm going to do it from the other side. You need that really in tight, so I'm going to pull all the fabric back and then come a little bit over from my original stitches and just go forward and back. I might have to do this 2 or 3 times in different places. Don't know whether you can see, but there was my original stitching and there's my secondary stitching. So if I pull that back a little bit open here, but I think that would be okay. Those sharp corners are really awkward to get. I've got 2 parts for the zip. I'm just going to put a 1/2 inch seam allowance on there. That should be fine for what I need. Forward and back both sides. Fold over enough to go on here. There we go, that gets that started. Fold that over and make sure that goes there. And make my way down the zip. I'm not going to pull the fabric. If you want to, you could iron the fold over. That works too. All the way down. I'm going to pop the other side in. So I folded that over, making sure that the tops are even, like that. Slide it into place and start sewing. You can see that there's the corresponding side, and I did it this way because I wanted to try to keep the back as close as I could in line. I'll lift that up so it will have enough fabric to cover the zip teeth, and I'll work my way down. So here's my first circle. Because it's not a complete circle, I can't really line it up properly, but I can eyeball where it needs to go. Now here I can actually line it up with that side, and hopefully if I make my way all the way down, the zip should come out just about right. That square matches up too. That's good. I've got lots of points of reference to keep the zip even. Often a zip will walk one side compared to the other. I think it's the way it's rolled onto the cob, to be really honest with you. Now I've just opened the zip. I know that the top tooth on this side is the upper one. I always try to have it on my left hand side when I do this. So the zip could be facing the other way. It's just the way I like to try to get these in. Line them up and then push that down. I did actually. Got it first time. Pull that down. If one of these sides is slightly loopier than the other, it means that's the looser side, so you have to try again. Here's the border with the zip in. Pop that up there so the weight's above, not below. Fold that over and over again, like that. And I'm going to center the border. Now you'll see that there's a little bit over there. It's the same on the other side, so I'll make that as equal as possible. Make sure that fold is as even as possible. I'm going to sew all the way across. This is twofold. It holds the zip in on both sides of the zip. It also gives it a little bit more strength. Where the zip is, reverse and go to the end. I have a seam here, so I'm going to put the center of the zip to the center here. If it doesn't line up when I finish, that's fine. I'm going to work my way back like this. That should fit. It might be too long. Yeah, it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that along, which now means the center of my zip is not going to be in the center back, but that's fine. I've adjusted that because the zip would have come over the back end and I don't want that to happen. So I'll put that there. Underneath here, I am going to start sewing on top, and I'm going to reverse back and then forward so that that's really held into place. Make sure that the raw edges are all together. Put that over one. Reverse. That ensures that everything's held into place. Make sure that that's even either side, which it is, and across. And then to the other end of this back. Not all the way along, but most of the way along. So this is the end, and I'm going to fold that over like that. Cut that off. I'm just going to seal off the other end. Just double checking that is that corner there. That goes around there. So I've got it the right way round. Always check. I have in the past put things together and then realised I've got them all twisted around the wrong way. It takes a while to unpick everything. Fold that back like I did on the other side. Centre the border. You often find that the zip in the border, although you've cut it to the right size, it sometimes goes in a little bit narrower. And just as I did on the other side, I'm just going to sew all the way across. I want the bottom corner in where the zip is. Fold across. Make sure that that's level both sides. And that is my corner here. I'm going to pop the corner on there. Just double check that that's where I want it. I'm going to come back a little way. I'm not going to bother with this just yet. Make sure the raw edges are together. And so, I'm going to come into this corner first. I've just cut my corner there. Needle down, twist the corner into place, and then carry on going around. This corner here can be cut a little bit closer because I need to straighten that one out. On up. I can double check there that it's even. That goes into that corner just right. And as I did before, I'm going to keep the border straight like that and just put little pleats into the top and then across into the corner like I did on the other side and reverse. Forgot to do this. This actually needs a few little clips in it to go around. Pull the top around and go straight and reverse, and then pull it all into position around here and on up. I'll check that later. Because I've got from the seam here on both sides done, I'm going to just bring it into this corner here. So I'm going to make sure that that is even as I come into that corner. I'm going to fold that corner in like I did at the bottom, so I know that it's where it should be. Fold the corner into place. Just make sure it's equal that side and the other way, and it should all pull in nicely. I'm just going to sew this in. I didn't want to mess with it earlier as I was sewing the corner around, just in case I got it wrong. Let's put that in. Over sew your stitches. That's that side. Find the other end and do that, and then I'll put the rest of the zip in, just in case the zip walks. It's better to stabilise everything before you make a mess. Only because it's such a long zip, I don't want to mess with it. Double check that's where it needs to be. And again, I'm not going to sew this down. I'll sew that in a minute. Put that underneath. Double check that's where I want it. I think that moved. Be prepared for things to move. Oh no, it didn't. It was just me thinking it had. I've just come around the second side that I'm going to complete. And then I do the front. If you've got something that's really plain and doesn't match anything, hook your zip into place and go from the zip side all the way around, and then close off the zip at the other side. Work my way around. Line the corners up, that looks about even, like that, and then sew all the way across. I should be able to straighten anything out if I need to as I go. It's really not that imperative. Well, it is and it isn't. If it was a side border, I would worry a little bit more, but on the back here, it's not going to be a matter if it's like 1/8 of an inch out. I will work my way across to the other end of this zip and make sure it goes in nicely. This is the other end, hold that, and work my way across to the center, and that's more or less in, so I think I'm going to be fine. You could pin it. I would suggest if you're not that sure of your sewing, then pin it. That's fine to the center, and then I'll work out the sections on the other side of the halfway mark. On a long zip, make sure that you know where the zipper is before you open it. I have in the past opened it behind and then had to undo everything and open it up. Always worth double checking. I'm going to check all my corners to make sure they're fine, especially those really sharp ones. Oh, they went in quite well. I'm thinking I might be able to get that a little bit closer here and on there. Here's the inside cover and the border. I cut the border to 3.5 inches. Feel that 2 inches always looks very skimpy, especially if you've got a large cushion. So I'm going to put just under a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to just sew on round, which is slightly bigger than the finished case. As you usually do, cut in towards the corner so you have some leeway. Twist that over and up. Because it's on a diagonal, don't pull it, because if you pull it you're going to have a funny shape. Just hold it and let it follow the edge and get sewn into place. When you get to the top corner, cut in and twist into shape. Now I'm going to sew the rest of the way around. I've got one side done, and I'm going to go around to all the corners, pull that out, and then I'm going to find the corresponding corner here and pop it in. I'm going to pin it like that. I'm going to make my way all the way around so that all of the corners match up. When I sew it, I'm going to readjust everything because this is just to give me an idea of where everything is. I am going to start, here's the back end of the cushion, because I want to leave it open so I can push the form in and then close it off by hand. Here is the corner that I want to sew in, so I'm going to line it up 1/2 inch from the turn here, pinch that together and pull that out. The reason is where the fold of the fabric is where I'm going to be pivoting and going on up. Having worked that out, I'll slip that under here like this. Make sure your raw edges are all lined up. I'm going to sew about 2 inches into that corner so that I've got a good starting point on the seam that I'm going to hand sew in. Forward and back, so that's nice and tight. Then out to the side here. When I get to the corner, lift the foot up, turn, oh sorry, how can I forget, it's too early in the morning. So I'm going to cut in there like that so that stays flat, turn the top around, pop it down and start sewing into the next corner. Straighten it out underneath it, and I'm just going to make my way around this to the other side, and then I'll just cut that back and sew it along here. I'm just going to sew across here. I've gone back about 1 inch on my previous sewing, and then I'll carry on going over about 1 inch on this side too. I am going to straighten this side out because putting a corner in like this is really difficult. I put everything in that I need to consider prior so that I don't forget anything. So I'm going to take this off. I've just remeasured everything and I need to take an inch off here, which means I need to cut back here as well. And then I'll come back and cut the other length off that I need to make it fit. Because this is such a long opening, I could have sewed it a little bit closer, but I don't like stressing the stitches that I've already put in. I have already pinned across about a good ½ an inch. I'm still going to put more in as I go along towards the side that I'm going to be sewing. I find that if I do it this way, everything more or less stays in place where I want it to. And then as I sew it, I'll fold the seam into position where I want it. Actually, this one I can fold over with the seam allowance and secure. So that's already secured, and I think I'll put another one just here just to fill that space, and then it won't roll. So what I've done is I've come over about an inch, and I'm going to do what you call a ladder stitch. So I'll go in one side and then the other like that. I've got double thread here because I've run out of upholstery thread. So I've just doubled it over to pull through. Then I will just continue using this stitch all the way down as I go. I find this a really useful stitch to use for lots of things. And then as I come here, I'm going to pull this one out because as I come across, I'm going to pull this up like that and then sew across the fold of the fabric and then make sure that there's seam allowances there and into the cover at the top. It's about up to 1/4 an inch long each stitch. And I've got long thread, so that's why I'm having to do it this way. I put the insert in and I have filled this up with some loose dacron, and that's just enough to hold this into shape. You don't want it to be too full because nobody's going to be sitting there. I'm pleased. I think the gentleman's going to be thrilled. He's picking it up later today. I believe I might have a couple more little projects out of this fabric, which is going to be quite fun. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe, hit the bell button, and a few thumbs up would be brilliant. And in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao.